Privileged to inform this august gathering that we are joined today by our Veer Naris and ex-servicemen whose presence here is both humbling and profoundly inspiring. As part of the pioneering initiative to promote grassroots legal support, Veer Naris and ex-servicemen have been engaged as paralegal volunteers. To begin with, 15 Veer Naris and 8 ex-servicemen have been engaged across UT of J&K and Ladakh, and certificates of engagements will be presented during the course of this event. This initiative creates a trusted interface between legal institutions and defense community, ensuring that legal aid is delivered with dignity and lived understanding. Now, as I move further from here, I also wish to draw your attention to the Indian Soldiers Litigation Act 1925, a century-old legislation, but to date as we speak, profoundly relevant. Now, I would delve a little deep here. There's something really crucial coming away. Recognizing the unique constraints faced by the soldiers deployed under special or war conditions, this act provides a unique procedural shield. At its core, it provides for the postponement of legal proceedings involving Indian soldiers who are unable to attend court due to service under special conditions. Upon receiving certification from a prescribed authority or the commanding officer, the court is required to postpone suits, application, and appeals until soldiers can reasonably appear. This act also empowers even the collector to intervene in cases where a soldier is unrepresented and appears to be unable to attend court, ensuring that soldiers' rights are not prejudiced due to absence. In such cases, notice must be issued to the prescribed authority, and the court is bound to suspend the proceedings unless exceptions apply. In addition to, now that's another facet to it, in addition to these protective measures, the Act mandates relaxation of limitation periods, excluding from computation the time during which a soldier was serving under qualifying conditions. This applies not only to the soldier, but also to their legal representatives in case of a death during service. In a sense, the Act creates a protective legal framework that shields serving soldiers from procedural disadvantages arising from their service obligations, thereby ensuring that justice is not denied simply because their duty to the nation always comes first. However, if this framework is examined in today's context, a compelling question that arises, which would seek an answer from each one of you sitting here: why should this protection be limited only to the civil and revenue matters? In a time where criminal litigation, particularly cases under Section 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, increasingly involves serving soldiers as complainants and becomes imperative to ask, is it not time to extend similar protection on the criminal side as well? And a survey across Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh revealed that a considerable number of such cases are currently pending before various courts, often involving soldiers unable to meet procedural deadlines due to operational exigencies. The strict timelines imposed for the issuance of a notice or filing a complaint in such cases often exclude those who serve not by law but by circumstances. Soldiers posted at borders in counter-insurgency operations or on prolonged deployments cannot always issue legal notice or appear before the court with rigid statutory windows. And I say this as patron-in-chief of the legal service authorities of J&K and Ladakh, that the legislative gap prompted a deeper legal policy reflection, and after extensive research, analysis and institutional consultation, a clear realization emerged that a set of coordinated legislation amendments is necessary to bring the Indian Soldiers Litigation Act 1925 with the demands of modern-day litigation involving defense personnel. And the centenary of this legislation offers a timely opportunity to extend its protective mechanisms to criminal cases where a soldier is a complainant, especially matters under 138 of the Negotiable Instrument Act.
This is the world's first reusable cotton swab. It can remove up to 10 times more earwax. Latest studies show that traditional cotton swabs are
and potentially more. This reform effort also aligns with a broader, now this is again crucial, this reform effort also aligns with a broader national imperative, as the Ministry of Defense has declared current year as the year of reforms. So why should legal reform be left behind? Suffice it to say, a comprehensive legislative framework has been formulated, is formulated, to the National Legal Service Authorities, and if it finds approval of Honorable the Executive Chairman Nalsa, widely known for his unwavering commitment to the institutional excellence, there is every confidence that the proposal will be steered in the right direction. Now, this brings us to something extremely crucial in context of the two central themes of the conference. One that cuts to the very core of the constitutional vision of equal access to justice and which needs immediate gap bridging. Despite forming a deserving and vulnerable class, members of the armed forces, ex-servicemen, and their dependents are not expressly included within the scope of the statutory framework governing legal aid, even though they face a growing volume of civil, revenue, and service-related litigation. There are compelling and multi-dimensional reasons to provide such institutional support. Soldiers often operate under extraordinary constraints, including long deployments, all of which limit their ability to access timely legal assistance. These operational challenges are further compounded by their personal and family vulnerabilities. These difficulties become particularly acute in rural and semi-urban areas where access to legal resources, awareness of rights, and availability of affordable legal advice remain significantly limited. It may again come as a surprise to many that a national level recommendation in this regard existed for over 5 decades. In 1973, much before even the Legal Service Authorities Act even came into being, expert committee on legal aid chaired by Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer recommended that legal aid should be extended to serving defense personnel, ex-servicemen, their wives, and war widows. The committee rightly recognized that those stationed in perilous terrains and remote borders face unique barriers in accessing justice. It aptly affirmed the legal aid in its truest sense must defend the defenders. You serve at the front lines, on mountains, in deserts, across oceans, and yet sometimes your struggles, your voices remain unheard beyond battlefield. That must change. And I'm quite hopeful, rather a feeling creeps in, that possibly that change is about to unfold in a moment from now. Encouragingly, Honorable the Executive Chairman Nalsa, Justice Suryakant, is here, given the deep sentiment and unwavering regard he holds for the defense forces of our nation. We are confident he has something truly meaningful up his sleeve, something crafted with thought, compassion, and vision as he prepares to launch the Nalsa Veer Parivar Sahayata Yojana 2025. And if our sense proves right, this initiative could well mark a watershed moment in the history of legal aid in India, ushering a new era of inclusivity, recognition, and service for those who have long stood guard for the nation. This vision aligns squarely with the very purpose of our gathering today, to bridge the long-standing institutional and procedural gaps that impede access to justice for defense personnel and their families. Ladies and gentlemen, as I draw to a close, I am reminded of a quote I once read: "If you truly wish to do something for a soldier, be an Indian worth fighting for." Jai Hind.